Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 in Build Lessons. Today I'm going to be going over how to plan out your build before you actually start building it. Because, to be completely honest, even some of the greatest builders on Minecraft will tell you that if you don't at least have an idea of what you are going to be building, the build is not going to be your best work. Most of the time, you cannot just sporadically throw things together and expect to have a coherent build. So, what I'm going to go over is some really basic techniques that I use to lay out what I plan on making. And when it comes to making houses, it's pretty basic. As you see, I have two colored wool in my inventory, white wool and orange wool. The white wool I'm going to use to mark corners or variance points in my house, and orange I'm going to use to mark a very rough line of where I expect my paths to be. Just to get a rough estimate, it doesn't need to be exact, and things can be tweaked a little bit. So, to start it out, I'm just going to place a piece of white wool, and this is going to be a corner of some house somewhere. And let's just say I wanted to bring that out to here, and then bring the house in this way a little bit. Basically what I'm going to be doing here is just laying out the corners of where the build is going to go. So right here you can picture a house of this shape and this size, and these are the corners of the house. So obviously this isn't the greatest way of showing how this is, because when you try to place a bunch of other houses next to each other, you're not going to really be able to tell what's going on. This is just the way that I've typically done it. By no means is it the most efficient, but I'm going to finish laying out a basic path and layout, and I'm going to then go over and explain to you exactly why I chose to do some of the things I chose to do. Okay, so what I have just done right here is, with orange wool, I have laid out the shape of where I want my walkways and paths to go, basically the main road. Now, I don't have to necessarily stick to this exactly, but this will be a general template for where my structures are going to go, and this is only for demonstration purposes, so I'm not actually going to keep this, because that's not really a great house. So what I'm probably going to do is, right around here, just going to mark out, let's go 3 units away from the road. I'm just going to mark out a box. I'm actually going to fill the insides in this time, just to give a little bit of a better explanation of exactly what's going on. Now that's really small. So basically just keep experimenting around with sizes, and eventually you should find one that doesn't seem too big and doesn't seem too small for what you're trying to work with, and then just roll with that. So I'm going to just mark out a few houses following the curve of this road, and I'll be back with you again and for another update. Okay, so I have laid out an area here, and as you see, there's actually room for me to come in here and add another path going out that way. So as you see, this is what the town layout is looking like so far. I don't have any houses over here yet, and I thought I'd build a little bit of this on camera. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm just choosing a starting point around which I want to build a house, and then I'm selecting some sizes, and every 2 blocks I'm going to mark it with a 2-high pillar. Now these 2-high pillars mark where the possible places for me to put the corner. Now obviously you could put it really anywhere, but in order to really have an easy time designing the house itself, typically you should follow having your corners a multiple of 2 units away. That way you all your faces have an odd number, because odd numbers are much easier to work with than even numbers when you're trying to add detail. So I'm going to bring this house over a little bit more. This house is going to be, I guess, a little bit more important. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and a little bit different of a design. So it'll probably come out one more, and then basically these are just useful markers to knowing exactly how the shape of your house is going to look. Once you place out the corners, you can then fill them in. And you can use any material. I just choose to use wool because there's several colors of it. I can use them to mark out any type of feature. And I'm going to actually come out 2 blocks right there. That looks good. Reverse the effect on the other side over here. And that does follow it, right? Yes, good. So as you see, the shape, you can fit some pretty interesting shapes in here. I'm going to make a house, but I'm going to offset this one by 1 so it doesn't look like everything is perfectly lined up. And I'm going to just lay out some more houses. And this part of the building process is relatively boring, but it is a very important step that a lot of people do not take. It really will make your builds look better, not necessarily the build themselves, but it will make your entire build overall look more structured. And structure is one of the 10 aspects we went over in the first video. So, this is one of the ways to implement structure into your build. As I mentioned when we were doing it over there, and I was talking about structure, I said the structure was also the physical layout of how you plan your build to look before you start building it. Because if your build doesn't have any structure, if it's not planned out, if it's all just randomized and just all of a sudden put into it, if you just randomly start building and you have no idea what you're trying to do, your build's going to look completely muttered, and that does not look good. So essentially what I'm trying to do is just lay out a very basic template of some houses. They don't have to be big houses, they can be small houses. Trust me, if you add multiple floors to these houses, they're actually pretty big. So they don't have to be extremely massive buildings, especially when you're trying to make a town. It's a lot easier to work with if you have smaller buildings, because otherwise you'll be taking a lot of time trying to get the buildings to work. So there you go, that's basically what I did over here. I'm going to continue for this area and over here, and I'll be back when I'm done with that, and that'll basically conclude the video. I'll be continuing off of this in the next video, but for now, that's basically going to be it. So when I get these done, I will give you an update, and then I'm going to talk to you about this over here a little bit, because I just need to go over a few things here. So see you in a minute. Okay, so here is my completed city layout. It's pretty rudimentary, but basically each of these outlines is where a house is going to go. And this orange line is where the roads are going to go. These 2 bigger buildings over here and over here, this one probably the most, this is probably going to be the equivalent of the town hall. It's the biggest building. It's at the intersection of the majority of the streets. You can see it from a majority of the town. And so I would figure it would be a big focal point for this area. So this other building, I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but these are both going to probably be 2 more important buildings. And thus, because of that, around them, I did make some of the properties a little bit bigger. As you see over here, the properties right near the town hall are a tad bit, like a smidgen bit larger than, like, for example, that one. Um, so this is basically what I'm going to be working with on the next video. I hope I show a little bit here of exactly how this is done. I mean, it's really a basic art. It's just a step that people tend to miss, and it's pretty important to point out that this is very important. Probably one of the most important things you can do if you're not making a single building. If you're making a cluster of buildings or a group of buildings, this is a necessity, because otherwise you're going to look cluttered. As for this mountain over here, in the last video, at the end of the last video, you saw me using Foxhole Sniper to create this terrain, and I'm a little bit worried that some people might have been expecting that this might have something to do with the next video in the series, which obviously it did not. This does have some importance, but it's not going to show itself until later on in the series, when we get into talking about structures the size of this. So, this is not a massive structure, but it is big compared to what we're talking about at this current point, and this is actually really incomplete. It's going to expand all the way over to here and go down a little bit. Basically, I am working on this project. It is a medieval castle themed build. This I'll be going over more in later videos. However, this really does not have much use for us right now, as we have not gone over some of the steps I'm going to need to talk to you about before I really start teaching how to do a build of this scale, and larger eventually. So, for now, I just thought I'd give a little sneak peek in case people were wondering what this place was for that they saw. It will be mentioned in a future video, but I don't know, maybe episode 10 or more, somewhere around there. Expect the thing to be complete by around that point, and sometime after that I will be demonstrating some of the next tutorials with this build. So the build isn't complete, so I can't even point out some of the features that I need to talk about, but once it is complete, there will be a lot to go over. So I need to go over those before I get into this build, so that you can even really understand what exactly I did, what my thought process was, how I got to this point, where it started from, and step by step how I got to this point. So at the end of each video, I might add a little bit of a status update on how this build is going, but I won't go into any detail of exactly what I am doing. That will be for later. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. The next video will be out sometime, either on the weekend or next Wednesday. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you there.